Hello, Bill.
Good afternoon, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
Wednesday afternoon. It's the day before my older daughter's birthday, so I just attempted to make a birthday cake, which I'm not a super baker, but I have done it. I made my younger daughter's birthday cake in February, which they liked. So Laz asked me to do it again for her, but to make it a layer cake. I did a sheet cake the first time. And I read a thing online saying it's no big deal to transfer a sheet cake recipe to a layer cake recipe or vice versa. Just the baking times get adjusted. And so I dumped the batter into 2 round cake pans, and it all bubbled over. And, the batter spilled all over the hot oven, and I had to keep opening up the oven to scrape out the burnt batter. And probably if you open up the oven while you're making a cake, you're going to get a sunken cake. So now I got 2 sunken cakes. And, since the batter was spilling over, it's kind of crusty on the sides, which means I can't easily dump it out from the pan. And so I'm going to have to...
You're lucky you're not suffering from some third-degree burns or something
I have burned myself many times in the cooking process, but I did not do that this time.
So my only question is, does Laz follow her old man's birthday tradition of sort of defining what's going to happen on her birthday, and other people may or may not join in?
Not consciously. She has moved away from wanting the big party and has moved towards, smaller, close friends, wanting to do a sleepover, wanting to go do an outing. She definitely likes to, I shouldn't be talking because she gets mad when I get into her business.
You're not allowed to talk about this.
That's right. I should shut myself up before I get myself into more trouble.
That's a shame because it's super exciting Blogging Heads commentary.
I know. I know. The parenthood talk is what the fans want, but I got to respect the privacy.
I know they want that, but yet I keep dragging you back into politics.
I was listening to, I was trying to get through Joe Biden's Stephen Colbert interview while I was cooking. And, my children definitely are not loving politics because I love politics. They usually, this is boring. Who's this, Schmo Schmeiden? Turn this off. So I didn't get to finish that. But I was told that was a really good Biden interview. It's like a 50-minute thing, and he goes deep. He talks policy, gets into the details. People were sending this to me saying, this shows this guy's not in mental decline. This guy shows he's with it. He's on top of policy. He was engaging. Then, of course, 12 hours later, he does the Charlemagne the God interview, and nobody's watching the Stephen Colbert interview.
Okay, in fairness, I will say this. He didn't see, we could talk about all the, problems with saying what he said, but he didn't seem to be doddering. No. He looked energetic and sharp and,
It was too energetic.
Maybe.
Back in.
He was too interesting. Yeah.
I wrote a piece not too long ago arguing all this, bedwetting over Biden's digital operation was overwrought. Free media is where these things are won and lost. That's what Super Tuesday proved. If anything, Biden should be doing is more free media. And I even went as far as to say he should be very wide-ranging in the media he does. And I explicitly suggested go on Charlemagne the God's show, amongst other things. Go on the shows of people that disagree with you. Mix it up. Show that you are willing to hear other people's point of view and disagree civilly, to show that as a way to exemplify that you would be a president for all people. And I went as far as say, is that going to lead to some off-message moments? Sure. But we've seen Biden have those off-message moments before, and it's been okay, because by and large people at least then say, hey, you're a real guy, you're not some robot.
Well, I think there was a fear, Bill, that this would be like his 47% moment.
Yeah.
Remember Mitt Romney talked about the 47%. I remember when it happened, I underestimated the impact of that, but that really hurt him. Hillary Clinton with the deplorables comment, that really, I was like, she really isn't saying anything that hasn't been said by everyone else. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Romney. I mean, Romney said the quiet part out loud, There's a certain percentage of people who are just never going to vote for you, no matter which party you're in, right? And I think Romney suggested some of these people were like dependent on the government, right? And that was maybe that was the insulting part. But whatever the case may be, there was a sense that this might end up really, we would still be talking about this comment, this Joe Biden gaffe, months from now. It feels, Bill, maybe I'm wrong. I know Trump has some T-shirts printed that says "You ain't black" or something to that effect. But it feels like this is like 10 scandals ago now. Not for Biden, for Trump.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of elements there. It wasn't that long ago when Kamala Harris printed up T-shirts after supposedly forcing Biden into a gaffe about race, and it ended up blowing back on Kamala. I tweeted right away that I thought if the Trump people think this is going to take Biden down, I suspect it's going to be like every other controversy Biden went through that doesn't really move the needle at all. And so I think there are 2 or 3 reasons for that. One, as you intimated, Trump has generated 2 or 3 of his own scandals in the last 72 hours. He goes out of his way to not stay on point. While his right. I actually keep a Twitter list of Trump campaign people, and for 48 hours it was all "You ain't black," nonstop. All this manufactured outrage. There's like several videos cut.
They could have milked that for weeks if they wanted to.
I mean, they were trying. They cut the ads right away, and I think they were going to cut ads bringing up Joe Biden, the crime bill, and target that to younger African Americans anyway. I mean, this is the same game plan they ran against Hillary 4 years ago with pushing super predator type stuff into the bloodstream. Those weren't the ads he put on TV. Those were the ads they put on social media that were targeted.
This doesn't strike me. The "You ain't black" line, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't want to pretend that I'm in touch with the African American community, like the inner workings of it, the thought process. But I would think that that's offensive. That Biden's line is offensive to conservative African Americans, but it's not a wedge issue in the sense that it's not going to divide the people who are already for Biden. It's not going to turn them off to him, right? Because the comment doesn't lend itself to that, does it? I
mean, neither one of us are the spokesperson for the African American community, so take it all with massive grains of salt.
I think that's pretty obvious,
right.
But we'll throw that caveat out. Yeah.
But my sense of it is, so people most offended are conservative blacks that were never voting for Biden anyway and are just trying to milk it as much as possible. Then you have, I think, a good number of other African Americans that say, this is what we say all the time. Maybe it's not so cool for a white guy to say it, but we don't really disagree with the sentiment. And then I think there's some folks in the middle saying, "Hey, guy, you're out of line here. Whatever the underlying truth is, it is just not your place. You got a little bit too comfortable there, buddy." And the question then is, are the people in that middle group, are those people who will actually tip over, and folks who were not all that thrilled with Biden in the first place? Biden didn't get every black vote in the Democratic primary. You got the majority of them, but not every single one. Those who are not with him in the first place, does that make them pause, make them think about staying home, not chipping in a few bucks, not making a phone call? And it's a little early to say, because it's been too early for poll data to materialize to gauge that. But it certainly helps Biden that this has not been kept in the media the last 2 days, because Trump he took Biden's bait on the golf outing ad, and he attacked Joe Scarborough and passed off a debunked conspiracy theory.
He accused a political rival or media rival of murder, essentially.
Right.
It's insane. I mean, it's unfathomable. I mean, we should just remind ourselves that we're just sort of brushing it aside, like, oh, and he threatened to move the convention, the Republican convention, from Charlotte,
and he made fun of Biden for wearing a mask, which was just like the most basic of the guidelines of going out in public at this point is you wear a mask, and it's not just made up guidelines; it's White House guidelines.
And he made fun of a reporter wearing a mask that asked him about Biden wearing a mask. Did you see that?
Right.
So, and he pretended he couldn't. He pretended he couldn't hear the reporter and asked him to pull the mask down.
Right.
So, but then I guess my point is, Trump changes the subject, I assume, to distract us from 100,000 dead, but he also, in so doing, changes the subject from "you ain't black."
Now, that doesn't stop the Trump campaign from still cutting those ads and still pushing them under the radar or semi under the radar through social media channels, trying to reach Biden's skeptic African Americans. But it's not supplemented by free media coverage because Trump is a constant, irrational, haphazard distraction.
Right. So, and again, I mean, I don't think it's a wedge issue. If you're Trump, who do you target that message to? In other words, you're not trying to suppress black turnout by showing every African American that. You would be targeting it even more precisely, I assume.
But it's still a type of suppression. You're trying to get fewer African Americans to show up to vote. Not suppression that I'm not going to allow you to the polling place, but it's just to give you a disincentive for bothering to get to go vote. Now,
do you? If you're, I don't want to beat a dead horse here. I don't know the answer. I'd love to see polling on if you're an African American, unless you're a conservative, do you find the notion that you ought to be voting Democratic offensive? Like, is that? I don't know. I mean, look, I actually have a problem with the idea that any immutable, characteristic should be determine which political party you're in. But on the other hand, Biden's running against Donald Trump.
Well, but
who has said some horrible, and Biden was Barack Obama's vice president, very loyal vice president.
Well, the underlying message that Republicans want to put out is, hey, African Americans, whatever you think of us, however awful you think we are, the Democrats take your votes for granted. They say nice things and they don't deliver. And here's Biden basically saying, you're in my back pocket. I don't have to do anything for you. And and Charlemagne the God is one of those younger African Americans who is sympathetic to that message and is trying to pressure Biden to have a black-specific agenda, and which he said himself.
Is this about the running mate? The running mate too, or no?
It's partially about the running mate, but it's also about things like reparations. So Charlemagne the God wants Biden to go on the record about reparations and said the next time I have him on, I'm going to ask him about reparations. Now, Biden has a...
Do they want Joe Biden to lose to Donald Trump? Is that part of... Because that feels like what they're... I mean... I get what you're saying, but actually I was like, why are they pressuring? Why is Charlemagne the God pressuring Joe Biden? And then I saw Diddy tweeted something similar to Joe Biden. I'm like, is now the time? I mean, I've criticized this notion of there being a binary choice between Trump or Biden, but like, is now the time with Donald Trump doing so much crazy stuff? Is now the time to pressure Joe Biden?
Well, this is where I think there's a generational divide in the African American community, as there's a generational divide in America in general, particularly on the left side of the fence. Biden was the one major candidate that didn't embrace reparations. All the other candidates went out of their way, generally speaking. Bernie was a bit hesitant, but he kind of got pushed into it. They want to go out there and say, hey, we're going to stick our necks out on reparations as a way to prove ourselves to the African American community. And Biden was the guy, when he was asked for reparations, did this, massive word salad that landed on play record players for your children at night. And Biden's the guy that won the majority of the African American vote, largely from older African Americans who are generally more pragmatic and I think aren't don't want to pressure Biden to take positions that they believe are going to alienate swing white voters.
Which, by the way, and we talked about this last week, but there's 10% or something of the vote are these Trump Biden voters, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you really want to beat Donald Trump, if you really think Donald Trump is a bad guy, wouldn't it be nice for Joe Biden to be allowed to court these Trump Biden voters?
I think there's a good number of pragmatic African Americans that are with you on that point. It's those who did not vote for Biden in the first place, who are open to the argument that, hey, if you can't do these big ticket things like reparations, then what's the point? And the more Biden gets sort of pushed on those issues, that there's nothing he can say that will satisfy all constituencies, that feeds into Trump's strategy, which is divide and conquer.
Reparations were one of the issues in that, was it Washington Post or New York Times article about these Trump Biden voters, that was one of the issues where they're vehemently opposed to it. Right. So this is I've argued that Biden is this kind of his election to lose at this point, but you could see some potential problems here emerging.
But this is where I think the Trump strategy is likely to fall short this time. I think the hypocritical, double standard, disingenuous social media attack from the left to undermine the Democratic base strategy, that can work on the margins. That might nibble into the base here and there, and in a close race, that could make the difference, as it originally contributed to in 2016. If Biden's beating Trump by 8 to 11 points, which he has in some polls, it's not the average at this point was at 5.5 last I looked, but some of the better quality polls have it higher. And he's winning in the vast majority of swing states. I don't think you overcome that with a disingenuous strategy. I mean, think about this. One of Trump's main arguments, going back to the beginnings of his own campaign in 2015, is we don't have time to be politically correct. You can attack me for saying this racist thing or this misogynistic thing, but I just don't have time. The country doesn't have time to be politically correct. He has said just the other day that masks are politically correct. And his argument against Biden is essentially he was politically incorrect in his sentiments. Joe Biden's a racist. Joe Biden's a racist. Forget all of his record over the past 40 years. Forget that he was VP of Barack Obama. He said one impolitic thing, and he is a racist, and you should text woke. You should text woke to the Trump campaign.
That was a nice touch. That was a nice touch. I think Biden should turn this into a little bit of a Sister Soldier moment. He could have said, when he issued the apology, he could have said something like, I'm not politically correct, or I'm often politically incorrect. Actually, I like using that word because I think you're right. I think there's a lot of Americans who feel like political correctness has run amok. And say what you will about Biden, it might have been a gaffe or a mistake, but he didn't look weak. He also, as I was going full circle, he didn't look tired. He didn't seem to be doddering. He looked sharp, energetic, happy. I mean, I feel like this social distancing has generally been very good for Joe Biden.
This is why I think the Trump strategy. I think that there are a lot of people across the spectrum that aren't thrilled with being, word policers, who are more interested in, the essence of the person. The thing about the attacks on Hillary is there already was a narrative built up that the Clintons, plural, were part of bad policies in the 90s that hurt African Americans, and that wasn't a feeling of widespread acceptance amongst older African Americans, but certainly amongst younger African Americans. And while Biden is associated with some of the same policies, he also has the Barack Obama Association, and a long history with campaigning in African American communities and a lot of African American allies that has heavily mitigated those attacks. and the mere fact that it is widespread knowledge that Joe Biden is the nominee precisely because of the black vote mitigates that to a huge degree.
Yeah.
So I think it's very hard for Donald Trump to say, let's be politically correct about Joe Biden's language and forget all these other things that show that he has a strong bond with the African American community. I think that's a harder message to communicate. He's not working with existing narratives. He's trying to manufacture new narratives in a way that cuts against many of his own rhetorical choices and general attitude towards politics, which is, I should get to say whatever the hell I want to say, whenever I want to say it.
Yeah, one thing I think this does do is make it more likely Kamala Harris is picked when as you know, I think Amy Klobuchar is probably a better electoral pick. And it could be that Kamala Harris gets picked and that, hurts Biden electorally on the margins. I also think, I was just talking to James Hohmann from the Washington Post's Daily 202 email newsletter. We just did a Zoom call, podcast taping, and he was making the point this incident where I guess it looks like the police, what's the word for, allegedly on tape murdered an African American man, that actually could hurt Amy Klobuchar politically because she, as I guess a district attorney, I think in that same area, was not well regarded by the African American community. So I think if you take Biden's comments, some of just the stuff that's happening in the political environment right now, I think it becomes more and more likely Kamala Harris is the pick, and that, again, may not be the best move for Joe Biden, but he may feel pressured to make that pick.
Yeah, well, and I was bullish on Kamala from the beginning. I think she made a lot of sense before all of this. I think all the things you say do further tip the argument in her favor and certainly make it harder to pick Klobuchar. But the main elements for that reasoning were present ahead of time. There already was a vocal faction of people on the left, progressives, civil rights activists, already warning Biden against Klobuchar, that they would be actively annoyed if he did that. And there hasn't been an anti-Kamala faction. There's nobody saying, oh, for Pete's sake, whatever you do, don't pick Kamala. Nobody's saying that. So it's not as if, I mean, I can't know what's in Biden's head if he has some other reason to be hesitant about Kamala. But there's no indication that he really doesn't want to pick her and he's going to be forced into it now. There's a lot of reason to pick her anyway, and this just makes it easier. I don't think it's that Biden was going to be a disaster with the African American vote unless he picks Kamala. He could probably pick, Cortez Masto or Lujan Grisham and still be fine with the African American vote. But Klobuchar, I think, would generate a lot of discussion of why do we have to pick somebody who has all this baggage out of fear that we won't win the swing voters when you had qualified people of color who would probably do just fine. It's one thing if you had poll evidence saying you pick Kamala and Biden's going to lose to Trump by 5 points. If that poll number came out and Kamala was going to beat Trump by Klobuchar was going to beat Trump by 5 points, people would probably suck it up. But
is there polling showing the matchups?
I haven't seen a lot of matchup polling. The one poll I saw, I mentioned on a previous show, was in Michigan, and they tested Whitmer, and she was a 2-point drag on Biden, even though her general approval numbers were fine. If maybe we'll see more matchup polling in June and early July before the pick comes. But my guess is you're not going to see huge swings based on those numbers. You do see a lot of pro-Warren polling when you poll Democrats, with Kamala being second place.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really tell you all that much because...
You think the running mate is going to be announced in June? Did you say that?
I mean, it could be. I think more likely July.
Okay. And are both conventions are allegedly going to happen in August, right?
I think Democrats pushed their date back, but haven't decided if it's in person or virtual yet. It would seem pretty hard to go virtual, to go in person at this point. I mean, Biden is making it such a point of differentiation. I'm following the rules and he's not.
Right.
So he can't have an in-person convention if it's not going to follow the rules of that given time. And we don't really seem like we're in a place where a large gathering with even a modicum of social distancing which would be hard to enforce. I mean, you do a thing in a convention, you say, everyone stay 6 feet apart. Every time someone isn't 6 feet apart, you get a photo of that blows up all of your narratives.
Yeah.
So
if you've ever been to a convention, it's hard to imagine staying 6 feet, everybody being 6 feet apart. I mean, that's unlikely.
And all the advantage of having a convention with all the confetti and the balloons and the boisterous crowd, you're not going to get that. So why go through all that?
But apparently Trump is insisting. I have a piece up at the Daily Beast about this. I think there's a chance. I think there's a chance that he does pull it from Charlotte and he would do some sort of an outdoor speech, like more of a rally speech where he accepts the nomination somewhere in the Deep South. What do you think?
I think Florida is very likely. DeSantis wants it. Florida is a contentious swing state. And why butt heads with a Democratic governor, Democratic mayor, who have no reason to bend over backwards for you? Why should I spread the virus in my state on your account?
I think, I hate to use Trump has ruined the term both sides, but I understand from Trump's standpoint, why would, assuming that you want to hold a convention, and maybe that's the original sin, but assuming you're going to hold a convention, how could you go forward without a guarantee that you can hold a convention? You're going to spend all this money and energy to plan a convention and allow a governor to say, sorry, you can't do it. On the other hand, I understand the governor's standpoint, certainly. How can you welcome in tens of thousands of tourists in the middle of a pandemic, people who are arguably the least likely people to wear masks in America? You're inviting into your state. So I get both sides here.
And it'd be one thing if North Carolina is a swing state, and the Democrat governor there has won with a narrow margin first time around, and
he's up for re-election.
But his polling, he's up by a lot. He's not in a close race as it stands. That gives him a lot of cushion. If it was a close race, maybe he'd feel like, I got to make these Trump people happy, and do what he says. But he's not feeling that kind of pressure. And certainly the mayor of Charlotte's a Democratic city. He doesn't have that. I'm not sure if it's a he or she, so I apologize if I got that wrong. But whoever the mayor is, not going to be concerned about offending Trump voters in an urban area. So what's the upside for them?
Well, there is a potential economic cost. I mean, these conventions do bring in tens of millions of dollars normally. How much of a bump is that going to be now? I mean, everything's devastated no matter what you do. How many restaurants are going to be open around the convention hall? Are the hotels going to accept these people? I don't even know if they're ready to do that yet. Well, and part of it is this is still, believe it or not, still 3 months away. So, I mean, the Republican convention, what's it going to be like in 3 months? Things may really mellow by then, but we could also have a second wave on the horizon. So, it's nobody knows anything. It's so weird. I'm trying to decide, what do we do with our family, as things open up. Yeah, it's so difficult to decide. And I'm glad I'm not spending. By the way, tomorrow it was a Friday. You and I are going to be holding a Zoom call on Friday at the very time that we're having our DM Zoom, Bill. I should be headed with my family to Hershey, Pennsylvania to see Jim Gaffigan perform on Friday night, and I should be then spending the night in lovely Hershey, Pennsylvania, and then taking the kids the next day to Hershey Park and riding the Comet that wooden roller coaster. I should be doing all those great things, and instead we'll be Zooming. But I'm pissed off about that. But imagine spending all that money to have a convention and then being told, well, you can't really have a normal convention, though.
I mean, the libertarians, mind you, people who don't like being told what to do, just did a virtual convention to nominate their candidate. So they had the first major party, semi-major party convention done virtually. I did check into little bits of it. It was a bit awkward at times, but they did it. And they actually are planning an in-person convention in July to deal with other party business. This was strictly to nominate their candidates. But they did it. And for the Democrats and the Republicans, they don't have a lot of major business to do. They got sort of the run-of-the-mill party business stuff. This is meant to be a party and a celebration and a showcase of party messaging. And it's just not going to happen in that way with the way things are right now. So,
yeah. But it's not right now. I mean, think of how different things were 3 months ago, and imagine how different they could be 3 months from now. It's hard for me to say what it's going to be like then.
Well, at this point, though, Trump is so committed to being the candidate who is chafing against the rules, chafing against his own rules. Siding with those who want to reopen faster and not be all nerdy about wearing masks. Like, that's where he's situated himself. And to the extent that case numbers go up or down, they're kind of in a place of, people get it. People get sick sometimes. People die. What are you going to do? That's what I hear. What I hear when these interviews happen on the beach. Hey, I might get hit by a bus. What are you gonna do? Like, that's the sentiment he's riding.
Corona.
Right. So he's gonna
basically the mask has become, not since the Sans culottes versus the bourgeois have we had a scenario where clothing is such a symbolic signifier of a political civil war. But I mean, the mask has become like this symbolic thing, where like if you're either a Lake of the Ozarks regular person, or you're an MSNBC reporter elite. I mean, those are the two options, and people are getting yelled at for wearing masks. People are getting yelled at for not wearing masks. It's a weird thing where it should just be like, you're protecting other people, like it's precautionary. It's awesome. Good for you.
What do you make of, there are two pieces I read in Politico this week. One was Democrats worried that the economy is bound to pick up. It had a massive collapse. There's nowhere to go but up. It's not that it would be perfect by election day, but even if it's just partial, Trump could spin that to his advantage. And so Democrats should be careful not to be overly pessimistic and overly fatalistic and say things that can be proven wrong come September, October. And you got Corey Lewandowski and David Bossie on the Trump side probably sounding the alarm that, hey, your team is getting killed in the swing states. Your operation is not what you think it is, and you need to make some real changes if you're going to pull this thing out. You have both sides being pessimistic about where things stand. Do you have an opinion over who has more reason to be pessimistic?
Well, first of all, I think it's wise to overestimate your problems and so the prudent assumption is that you have to work really hard because this could happen, so I think both sides, pessimism is probably a good thing by and large. I guess there is such a thing as being demoralized or whatever. I don't think that's a risk for either side right now. I think they're very motivated, but you want to take it seriously that you could lose. I do think that this is Biden's election right now. I mean, I think the trends are all pointing toward Joe Biden. Obviously, the polling would confirm that. I think that there is something, though, to that Politico story about I'm not an economist, man, but there does seem to be some, it makes sense that like if you had a normal recession or depression, there would be like fundamental flaws with your economy. There wouldn't maybe even be demand, right? And that would be organically, there wouldn't be demand. But what we have right now is artificial, People are not allowed to engage fully in the marketplace. And so it stands to reason that if this coronavirus subsides and people are able to go back to open up, that the recovery could be quicker than it would otherwise be. And so I think that makes a certain amount of sense. Now, Democrats have the problem because you can't root against the economy. You can't root against America. And if Democrats are seen doing that, then that's not a good look. But I think they should, take serious the possibility, not that the economy is going to completely return, but that it could start to pick up some steam. And look, I think Joe Biden had a good shot before this whole thing anyway. But yeah, it's something to take seriously.
I mean, I feel like it seems highly implausible that we're going to be done with this crisis by November. I can't know where exactly the ups and downs of the curves are going to go, when we're going to have a lull and when we're going to have the next wave, but we are not doing the things that we need to do to shut it down. We are clearly...
It does, though. It seems like so much of this is in nursing homes.
Yeah.
So much of this was in New York City. I don't think you can keep Americans in their house much longer. And so to me, I think people are going to go about their business. And then the question is, do we get hit with a second wave that is scary,
But even if there's no peak in October or November, maybe you're not technically in the second wave at that moment, I don't think we're going to be in a period where we're sanguine. Well, yeah. I guess we're done now. Like, this level of anxiety is going to be present the whole way through. We're not going to have a vaccine. It's not going to be done. We're already seeing now, curves going up in more rural areas. So there's going to be a feeling of anxiety. I mean, different levels of different people. Obviously, there are people who are going to be blasé about it, but it's going to be hanging over everything the whole way through.
Sure. But I also think there's a sense, this is so different from a normal, like, economic downturn, where, like, normally it's like, I don't have money, I'm going to blame the president. Or, things are going bad, there's this feeling of malaise, I'm going to blame somebody. There's a sense that this is, like, artificial. And I also think it's like Trump calls this, when he's trying to be serious, he calls it the invisible enemy. But there is it is invisible. And I mean, and if you know somebody who's on a ventilator right now, it's not invisible. If you know somebody who's died, if you have a friend who has coronavirus, it's not so ephemeral or whatever. But for a lot of Americans, it's like there's this invisible thing that's supposedly menacing us, and I can't go get my haircut because of it. But is it even real? And why are these people not letting us out? And Trump is rooting for us to all, get out there and go back to the restaurant.
But that's Trump narrative, and I'm not saying Trump narrative isn't accepted by large chunks of the country. But one thing the Biden campaign has done that doesn't get noticed a lot is they didn't wait to establish their narrative. This is Trump's fault. Trump did bad things right away. He made the wrong decisions in January. He made the wrong decisions in February. He made the wrong decisions in March. He deserves the blame being affixed to him. He didn't create the virus, but he made lots of bad decisions that made it extraordinarily terrible in America, and they're pushing it out in their ad campaigns from the get-go in March, showing the quotes that he said in January and February, and tracking that with the rising
instead of Trump
counts.
Defining him,
right?
He defined Trump.
That's right. So there is, I mean, again, I'm not saying it means everyone in the country agrees with the narrative, but the narrative exists. It's out there, and it is bolstered by a lot of the free media coverage. So it's not like this paid narrative is happening in a vacuum. It's working alongside free media coverage saying Trump didn't do this, Trump buried this report, Trump didn't listen to his advisors over here and over there. So I don't think Trump's going to get off scot-free here. We already see in the poll data that he has not gotten the same bump that governors have gotten. In fact, I didn't check today, but 2 days ago, Real Clear Politics poll average Trump approval was the lowest number Trump has had in the average for all of this year. There had been a fairly big drop over the past week that erased all the bump that he got in March and took him even lower than where he was before March, not by a lot. You know, it was still around 44, so it was a little bit below 44. But if it goes any lower, then he would be at a point where you're starting to reach levels before the tax bump he got in early 2018
and it seems like he's losing seniors, right? And that might be tied to this.
Well, that definitely tied to this. I mean, Trump's been doing bad with seniors for a good several months now, and Biden's doing well with seniors. And you do well with seniors. I mean, this is why you can't look at Hillary's numbers and say, well, Hillary did well in the polls. Forget that. That's meaningless. I mean, I can't know what's going to happen between now and November. I'm not saying things are set, but if Biden's demographics are a different mix than hers, that's why Arizona's more competitive. That's why Florida's more competitive. I mean, these are states that have senior concentrations. That's why you do well with seniors. You're doing well with white people relative to what Hillary did and what Obama did. You're doing better with independents as well. So there's a number of areas where Biden is consistently doing better. That changes the nature of the map, and I think changes the nature of reaction to the virus itself. These are constituencies that are acutely concerned about where this virus is going to go, and if you're on the wrong side of that, you're going to have a big problem.
What's your T-shirt, Bill?
I don't usually wear T-shirts on the show. I try to.
Is that a band?
Try to class it up.
Is that a band?
It's not a band. This is from when Gina Louise and I relocated from California to New York in 2001, and we did a 2-month cross-country road trip, and it was the winter, so we took a southerly route. And we were in Roswell, New Mexico. This is Roswell, and we were in
home of the aliens, right?
So I think we were in the UFO museum there, and they had a bargain bin of T-shirts. And this is Roswell the musical, which apparently was put on there at some point in time. It's sponsored by Coca-Cola on the back. And it is a glow in the dark T-shirt. But I did not get to see the musical, sad to say. But I have the T-shirt. And
that sounds fun, though. I love the road trip. I'm sure it was, fun and stressful. But
this was the
great.
This was the least stressful of our entire time on this earth, because it was just 2 months. Neither one of us had a job. We had some money saved. We didn't have our itineraries. We just rolled into town, and we figured it out when we got there. And it almost worked. The only time it didn't work out. The one time it didn't work for us.
That's living fancy free and wild and crazy.
That's right. We did roll into Tucson, Arizona. And we inadvertently arrived the same weekend of the annual Gem and Mineral Show, which is so enormous it booked up every hotel in town. That was the one time we literally did not know where we were going to sleep tonight. We can't find anything, and we eventually found some real Fleabag motel. Well, actually, I tell you about we found a place that had a couple of rooms, but they were expensive, and we said, let's not do that. Let's find this cheap place. We're this cheap place. This is the kind of place where, you go to the cashier's window and there's bars on the windows. And we go up and say, a room, and the cashier's like, "Are you sure you want a room?"
Yes.
I was like, "Yeah, we want a room."
They hand you a remote control and a fly swatter, with the key. Yeah,
and so we take the room, and there's weird blood stains, and there's weird bugs in the bathroom, and we come back and we say, we're not going to take this room, and the guy's like, yeah, that's what I thought. So, and we ended up finding that one expensive place and went there. Otherwise, good times had by all. Doe's Eat Place for steaks in Mississippi. We had 2 Mardi Gras. We had New Orleans and the Mobile, Alabama Mardi Gras. Great barbecue.
The original one.
The original one in Mobile, That's right. We were in. I got my cowboy boots in Texas, the ones that you saw. They were bought on that road trip.
You wore them to Texas, yeah.
Great music in Austin, Texas. Great barbecue. And in New Mexico, outside of Roswell, we hit the White Sands National Park, which is near the White Sands Missile Range. And so on the way to White Sands National Park, we get pulled over because they were missile testing, and we had to sit and wait for an hour and wait for the missiles to shoot off, which is probably fairly commonplace. Everyone else has their deck chairs and their coolers and their six-packs to watch the missile show, which happens not far from the road. You're kind of close to the missiles, which is a little freaky. But
Bill, are you thinking what I'm thinking?
Road trip? DMZ road trip?
You and me. We should do this. We could die a vlog on the way.
If I could escape this house, if I could escape familiar responsibilities, Matt, I would do that in a heartbeat. But I think the kids need to be out of the house. I think we have to hit college age before we can talk about.
This is going to be our Thelma and Louise road trip. I think I just named this episode, by the way.
Were there other topics, Matt, do we want to hit before we sign off? I can't remember what was on your list.
I think we covered a lot, but I did have a list of stuff this week. Joe Scarborough, Kayleigh McEnany. We talked about the Charlotte Convention. We talked about Biden's mask. We talked about You Ain't Black. And we sort of touched on police abuse. I mean, I will just say, and I've written about this at the Daily Caller, but I don't think we can underestimate the importance of iPhones and of everybody having a camera on them, because I really was surprised to learn how pervasive police abuse and police brutality is. And this latest thing in Minneapolis, which, maybe there's some more context that I haven't seen, but it looks pretty horrible. I mean, if a cop is going to put his knee on somebody's neck and they say, "I can't breathe, don't kill me," and you just leave it there for 5 minutes until the guy stops breathing. If you're willing to do that on camera with a crowd of spectators around, what in the hell happened before we had these cameras? I mean, how pervasive is this and was this? And I mean, there's another way of looking at it, which is to say that it's that it's just anecdotal, right? In the sense that you could say well, we see school shootings, but actually gun violence is down. Had to pick the most serious time discussion. Right. Levity. Anyway, that's my kind of takeaway from that.
I mean, you there's been so many anecdotes at this point. I think after the first round of anecdotes that began the Black Lives Matter movement, you would hear some statistics about you don't see when this happens to white culprits, but we're not seeing those videos. I mean, if those videos existed,
well, some of them do. Some of them do, and they don't get the play. There was a guy who, I think he was in a hotel hallway, a white guy who was killed by a cop for pretty much no reason. And it is on video, and it didn't get the media.
It's not that it never happens. I mean, obviously,
I agree.
It's obviously police brutality can happen to anybody for all sorts of situations. But there have been a lot of anecdotes showing what happens with African Americans in situations where it really defies logic. You are being filmed, and we haven't seen the footage yet, but the police officers had their own body cameras and they were on. Like, they should be aware that they are being tracked. I mean, and then you have the situation in Georgia where the assailants filmed the crime themselves.
And one of them was a retired police officer.
And handed the video to the media thinking this is somehow going to exonerate them. It just defies all logic. And then you have the situation in Central Park where the African American man is saying, I am filming you now. I mean, the filming is supposed to take away the concern of threats and violence. We're all being watched here. I can't hurt you while I'm holding a phone on you. And her reaction is to call the police and say she's being threatened. Like, it just doesn't make sense, yet people still do these things. So to tie this back into Biden, mind you, if Biden's great sin is to argue, I am so good for African Americans, I'm going to assert how good I'm going to be, and it'd be to sort of channel Ed Koch, it would be crazy not to vote for me. I mean, Ed Koch famously said you have to be, if you're Jewish, be crazy to vote for Jesse Jackson. Biden essentially, if you're black, you're crazy not to vote for me. It's hard to argue otherwise when he is the only person who is doing something in allegiance with the victims here, where you know Trump generally does not do that, and so that's why I think it's hard to play that card of how offensive Biden is when you're seeing all these things happen on Trump's watch. And Trump, I mean, the thing that Trump can try to do, and I think has tried to lay down these markers, is to it's the Kim Kardashian thing. Kim Kardashian came to me and had me release this one person, and I did. And I did sign this one. I did sign the First Step Act. I did something. He does want to have those in his back pocket.
He'll have video of his State of the Union where he was honoring Tuskegee Airmen or whatever. There's going to be some good video that he can put together in a 30-second ad. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
But I do think these examples are sort of few and far in between. He's not someone who on a day-to-day basis has been a source of racial harmony, and he is too in lockstep with those who are supportive of the police in these situations to be a good voice against police brutality.
Well, I mean, he's talked about, how we used to handle protesters in the old days, and or even police. You'll see them; they'll put their hand on top of the head when they're putting them in the squad car. Mm-hmm. I say, don't always be so nice, or something like that. I mean, he said a lot of things like that. So
this is why
I will say this.
Yeah.
Let me just. I will play devil's advocate here for a second as the conservative voice of the DMZ. One caveat. I agree that Trump is uniquely bad. But Joe Biden was talking about they're going to put you back in chains. Remember that? Mm-hmm. That was before Donald Trump. He would probably be saying that if Mitt Romney were running for president or were the incumbent president, Biden would probably be saying the same thing about you ain't black. And so that I would find more problematic, to be honest with you. But I think he probably would still be doing it. And I think that some of the Republicans, some of the conservatives who have just decided, I'm going to stick with Trump no matter what because of the left. They don't, because they're so horrible. They're going to call us names whether we are or not. Like, there is some credence to that.
Well, but these attacks on Biden are, you're being excessive in your rhetoric in trying to curry favor with the African American vote. And so I think it's hard to then argue to African Americans, don't vote for the guy who is telling you in too vociferous terms that he wants to do right by you. But the argument has to be that he's not going to do right by you.
Yeah. Well, I like your line about, what I meant to say is, you'd be crazy not to vote for me because I'm going to be so, like, and in fact that, again, he should be watching this show. I've said it before. And it would have been nice if he had said this a few days ago, but he could probably still do it tomorrow if he sees the show. I think it would be a good line for him to steal from you.
Probably not. Probably not. Trying to reach over Ed Koch is probably not the way for Biden to go.
He doesn't have to attribute that.
But I do think it would be in Biden's best interests to. I think he should continue to do media that is outside of that's not just safe spaces. He should mix it up. He should be more temperate in talking to those people, and have a more genial back and forth, but while also staying firm. Like it's worked for Biden to be defiant in the face of criticism of his past record, and to say, "Hey, my crime bill."
I agree. Look, it's the better, what is it, strong and wrong than weak and right. And I think Biden didn't look weak when he said that.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, alone amongst the other Democratic candidates in the primary, it did not seem like he had to beg for black votes and take positions that he had not taken before. He was able to assert that he had the record and the experience to deliver for the black community, and that was good enough. And I think that level, so if that level of comfort led him to say something impolitic last week, it still behooves him to have that comfort level. Still behooves him to say, look, I've walked in this community, I've represented this community, I know how to deliver for this community. Period. End of story.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, we are doing another Zoom call. So if you like smart long form commentary, or if you like, yours is going to be, you're doing a podcast. It's going to be like a highly produced history podcast.
I just so folks. Well, I'm doing a lot of rehearsals. I'm like, I have my research. I have my story for my pilot episode is probably going to be a 90-minute episode, going into a deep dive into
this is deep.
A deep dive into a historical story that you don't know well at all, if at all. And so my challenge now is to communicate in a way that's compelling. So that's why I can't just tell the story once and press record and be done with it. I'm going it over and over again so it sparkles.
And if I hadn't done my dissertation on this topic, I would have never even heard of it. So I do think it will benefit people. And if they want to support it and join us on our Zoom call, they can come to either your or my Patreon page, wet our beak a little bit, help support this kind of thing. And we will this is Friday when we're going to most people, I'm guessing, hear this on Thursday, and we're going to have our call on Friday. Instead of going to see Jim Gaffigan, I'll go to see Bill Scher. And probably
I lost my tickets to Liz Fair at Mass Mocha, which were for earlier in May. That is my big pandemic loss, and this was going to be a trip without my children. So
Bill Scher hardest hit by the pandemic. Yeah, I probably shouldn't complain, but I'm gonna. I'm largely blessed, but it would have been nice to do this little family trip. So follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show.
I'm going to leave you with one cliffhanger. This is just a sort of a trivial tweet that I put out earlier today. Best movie soundtrack songs that awkwardly tried to wedge in the movie's title into the song.
St. Elmo's Fire, number one.
So I have 4. St. Elmo's Fire, Romancing the Stone, we don't need another hero from Beyond Thunderdome.
Yes, she mentions Thunderdome.
Right.
Tina Turner
mentions
Thunderdome.
She says Beyond Thunderdome in the song.
Oh, wow.
Which makes no sense at all.
It's sort of, it's an afterthought.
Right. And now I'm forgetting my 4th off the top of my head. I'm playing a Rick Perry.
The 4th one was a little weak. Yeah.
What was it?
It was one that I was not familiar with. That's why I can't remember it.
Okay. Arthur's song, Arthur's theme. I'm sorry.
Oh, right.
I'm sorry. That's not weak. That's the classic example because this is when you're caught between the moon and New York City. The second verse, it was all about Arthur. Makes no sense at all compared in connection with the first verse. It's a completely made up verse to make it about Arthur. So anyway, so those are my 4. What should the 5th be? That's my challenge to you and to all the DMZers. So top 4.
I love a good challenge.
St. Elmo's Fire, Arthur, Thunderdome, Romancing the Stone. What should the 5th be?
I love it. Happy birthday to Laz. Good luck with the cake.
Thank you.
And I'll see you in the DM Zoom on Friday.
All right. Till next week. Until Friday.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.